Hi, so good to see you today. Today we're going to be reading a really cool book called The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins by Barbara Curley and Brian Selznick. And Brian Selznick is a Caldecott medalist, so he has won a lot of awards um, for his drawings and illustrations in other books. And Barbara Curley says down here, Siebert Honor Author. So this means they've won awards for their illustrations and their writings of other books. And so we can expect that this will be a good book based on that. Whether or not it actually is remains to be seen, but usually when someone's won an award for a book, and we can bet that it's good quality. So let's look at the blurb on the back that always tells us about the book that we're going to read. And it says, "Welcome to the extraordinary true history of the man who built dinosaurs." Ooh, that sounds cool. "From the abyss of time comes an awe-inspiring tale of passion and paleontology," which we know paleontology is the study of the science, the study of dinosaurs, their bones. All right. So before we begin, real quick, wanted to go over the activity sheet that goes with this. There's two sides. The first side is the family time side, and these are things that you can do, how to enjoy the book together with your family. And this one is how you can make some personal connections to your own experience in life, and then what this book is about. So this one says, take turns drawing a dinosaur in the box below using the features that are listed up here in the box above. And then you can compare and contrast the two different drawings to see how they're the same and how they're different, or how they're similar and how they're different. Because that's what a lot of times paleontologists and scientists, all they have to go on is very minimal description, and then ends up lots of different kinds of things come from that, lots of different types of dinosaur drawings. So that would be interesting to do. And then on the back side, on my own, this is something that you should be able to do on your own. But again, you can do this with a family member, or you can send me a text or write in the comments below if you'd like to do this with me. And this is a crossword. So there are some very impressive vocabulary words in this book, and a lot of them are in this puzzle. So you can use the word bank over here in the clues below to help solve this puzzle. And remember, you can always go back to the book for some context clues if you need to. So the book's here, and you can reference it, and then that way it'll help you understand the book better and learn some new vocabulary, which will help you in the future. So that should be a fun activity sheet to do. And let us begin our book. All right. Oh, don't forget, if you have this book on your home library bookshelf, take a moment, pause the video, and go grab it. You can read along with me. Otherwise, you can just watch the video and watch this book too, but sometimes it's better with the actual books. You can see the pictures better. So, but if you don't have the book, that's okay too. All right, here we go. The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins by Barbara Curley and Brian Selznick. Welcome to the Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. So this tells who it's dedicated. This is the dedication page and the acknowledgement page. So the author and illustrator are acknowledging who's helped them create this book, the research that they've done, and then who they're dedicating the book to. This one says, for Mary, Ellen, Tasha, and Kim, with special thanks to Tracy Mack for helping me find the story in history, and Brian Selznick for bringing the story to life. And that was the author. And then the illustrator, Brian Selznick, says, for Steve McCarthy. I always like to read those. It's interesting to find out the motivation and why the author wrote the story to begin with. Okay, so this is true story. So that I always love true stories. So some history. The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins, an illuminating history of Mr. Waterhouse Hawkins, artist and lecturer, by Barbara Curley, with drawings by Brian Selznick, many of which are based on the original sketches of Mr. Hawkins. Oh, that's cool. A true dinosaur story in 3 ages, from a childhood love of art to the monumental dinosaur sculptures at the Crystal Palace in England to the thwarted work in New York Central Park. It's all here. I think I'm going to learn something new today. Cool. So depending on how long this book is, we might do I might do a video in 2 parts. But either way, even if I don't, you can always just pause the video if you want to read it in 2 or 3 or more sections. That's the beauty of YouTube. Pause it or rewind it if you want to read it again. The First Age, London. How horse-drawn carriages clattered down the streets of London in 1853. Gentlemen tipped their hats to ladies passing by. Children ducked and dodged on their way to school. But Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins had no time to be out and about. Waterhouse, as he liked to call himself, hurried towards his workshop in a park south of town. He was expecting some very important visitors. He didn't want to be late. There he is. You can kind of see this. Oh, he's dropping some pictures by accident, and these people picked him up. Oh, there's one over there. As he neared his workshop, Waterhouse thought of the hours he'd spent outside as a boy. Like many artists, he had grown up sketching the world around him. By the time he was a young man, he'd found his true passion, animals. He loved to draw and paint them. But what he really loved was sculpting models of them. Through his care and hard work, they seemed to come to life. Now, Waterhouse was busy with a most exciting project. He was building dinosaurs. His creations would prowl the grounds of Queen Victoria and Prince Albert's new art science museum, the Crystal Palace. Even though the English had found the first known dinosaur fossil many years before, and the bones of more dinosaurs had been unearthed in England since then, in 1853, most people had no idea what a dinosaur looked like. Scientists weren't sure either, for the only fossils were some bits and pieces, a tooth here, a bone there, but they thought that if they studied a fossil and compared it to a living animal, they could fill in the blanks. And so, with the help of scientist Richard Owen, who checked every muscle, bone, and spike, that's exactly what Waterhouse was doing. He wanted to create such perfect models that anyone, a crowd of curious children, England's leading scientists, even the Queen herself, could gaze at his dinosaurs and see into the past. I'm going to just, oh, whoops, I'm so sorry. Oh, goodness, okay. My computer was sitting on my knee. Waterhouse threw open the doors to his workshop. Nervously, he tidied up here and there. His assistants came, then Richard Owen. At last the visitors arrived, Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. Wow. The Queen's eyes grew wide in surprise. Waterhouse's creatures were extraordinary. How on earth had he made them? He was happy to explain. The iguanodon, for instance, had teeth that were quite similar to the teeth of an iguana. The iguanodon, then, must surely have looked like a giant iguana. Waterhouse pointed out that the few iguanodon bones helped determine the model's size and proportion. And another bone, almost a spike, most likely sat on the nose like a rhino's horn. Just so for the megalosaurus. Start with its jawbone, compare it to the anatomy of a lizard, fill in the blanks, and voila, a dinosaur more than 40 feet long. Waterhouse was also making ancient reptiles and amphibians. While Richard Owen could imagine their shapes, it took an artist to bring the animals to life. Designing the creatures was only the first step. There was still the monumental task of building them. Waterhouse showed his guests the small models he'd made, correct in every detail, from scales on the nose to nails on the toes. With the help of his assistants, he had formed the life-size clay figures and created the molds from them. Then he erected iron skeletons, built brick foundations, and covered the whole thing with cement casts from the dinosaur-shaped molds. It is no less, Waterhouse concluded, than building a house upon 4 columns. So let's see what it says down here. So it says he starts with the drawing, then he does the small model in clay, 3 life-size model also in clay, bricks and iron hooping, then 4 we mold it, there's the mold, then 5 an iron skeleton that must support tons of dinosaur, and then 6 the finished dinosaur. Bricks, tiles, and broken stones all held together with cement covered with casts and painted. Tiles and broken stones. Man, I wonder how long that took to make just the one. Sounds like a very long and intense process. In the weeks to follow, Waterhouse basked in the glow of the Queen's approval, but he would soon face a much tougher set of critics, England's leading scientists. Waterhouse wanted to be accepted into this circle of eminent men. What would they think of his dinosaurs? There was only one way to find out. Waterhouse would show them. But why not do it with a little style? A dinner party, on New Year's Eve no less. And not just any dinner party. Waterhouse would stage an event that no one would ever forget. He sketched 21 invitations to the top scientists and supporters of the day, the words inscribed on a drawing of a pterodactyl wing. He pored over menus with the caterer. The iguanodon mold was hauled outside. A platform was built. A tent erected. As the hour grew near, the table was elegantly set, and names of famous scientists, the fathers of paleontology, were strung above the tent walls. All was ready. With great anticipation, Waterhouse dressed for the occasion in his finest attire. He was ready to reveal his masterpiece. Wow, look at that. When the guests arrived, they gasped with delight. Waterhouse smiled as he signaled for dinner to begin. With solemn formality, the footmen served course after course from silver platters. Up and down the steps of the platform they carried the lavish feast. Rabbit soup, fish, ham, and even pigeon pie. For dessert, there were nuts, pastries, pudding, and plums. 2 footmen stayed busy, simply pouring the wines. Wait, no, there they are. These are the footmen pouring the wines, and wow. For 8 hours, the men rang in the new year. They laughed and shouted. They made speech after speech, toasting Waterhouse Hawkins. All the guests agreed. The iguanodon was a marvelous success. By midnight, they were belting out a song created especially for the occasion. The jolly old beast is not deceased. There's life in him again. Don't know if I'm singing exactly how they did, but wow, look at that. Is so cool. The next months passed by in concrete, stone, and iron as Waterhouse put the finishing touches on his dinosaurs. Inside the iguanodon's lower jaw, he signed the work, B. Hawkins, Builder, 1854. The models were now ready for the grand opening of the Crystal Palace at Sydenham Park. 40,000 spectators attended the regal ceremony. In the sun-filled center court, Waterhouse mingled with scientists and foreign dignitaries. At last, the Queen arrived. The crowd cheered, "Hurrah!" Cannons boomed, music swelled, and a choir of 1,000 voices sang. Waterhouse bowed before the Queen. Then she and Prince Albert invited the spectators to enjoy the amazing sights. Waterhouse hurried to the lake and waited for the crowd to arrive. First 2, then 10, then a dozen more. Gasped, shrieked, "Oh!" Laughed, cried. So this was a dinosaur. So this is what it looked like. This is what he'd been working on. These are like life size with concrete and iron. Waterhouse was thrilled, for in addition to being an artist, he also saw himself as a teacher. He was convinced that the best way for people to learn about something was to see it. With this love of art and teaching, he knew he could do more. Educational posters, small models anyone could buy, lectures, books to illustrate. For the next 14 years, Waterhouse did it all. News of his success had reached America. In 1868, Waterhouse traveled to New York City, filling a lecture hall for talks about dinosaurs, evolution, even dragons. As he spoke, he sketched such marvelous illustrations that the audience burst into applause. And then Waterhouse received a delightful surprise. A letter from the head of Central Park inviting him to build American dinosaurs. His models would inhabit a museum planned for the park's southwest corner. Waterhouse was excited. America's first 2 dinosaurs, Hadrosaurus and Laelaps, had only recently been discovered. Here was his chance to bring these dinosaurs to life for all to see. So he's going to the United States in New York City to build dinosaurs for Central Park. Wow. Okay, so here's the second part of the story. The second age. The second age, America. Waterhouse set right to work. He spent the next 6 months traveling to American museums to learn about American dinosaurs. Again, he built something no one had ever seen before, the first model of a complete dinosaur skeleton. He presented the Hadrosaurus to the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, where it was welcomed with great enthusiasm. Now, Waterhouse was ready to build his dinosaurs. He returned to New York City to the workshop built for him in Central Park. He hired an assistant, and the real work began. Small models, life-size clay figures, iron skeletons, dinosaurs. While he and his assistant toiled inside, workmen outside began building the museum. Like the Crystal Palace, the Paleozoic Museum would be an enormous structure of iron and glass with a beautiful arched ceiling. Day after day, workmen dug the foundation. So this is what it was supposed to look like, I guess. Seems like something happened. It's not going to work out. I don't know. Okay, so who the heck's that guy? Okay, let's see. Then disaster struck. William Boss Tweed, a corrupt politician who controlled much of New York City, said the museum was a waste of money. At 6 feet tall and 300 pounds, Boss Tweed was a big man with an even bigger thirst for power. He reorganized the Parks Department and put his own men in charge. Waterhouse watched in dismay as the work on the museum was stopped. He began looking for a new home for his dinosaurs, but he was frustrated that a thieving scoundrel could thwart almost 2 years of work. In March of 1871, Waterhouse gave a speech at the New York Lyceum of natural history. He stressed the importance of science and art, then shared the troubles he had had with the boss. I trust, however, Waterhouse concluded, that in time the good sense of the people will awaken and that they will realize the vast importance of my work. The audience agreed. One man called the boss greedy. Another said that the boss was an enemy of mankind. The New York Times printed it all. Waterhouse carried on with his work, but on May 3rd, his dream was shattered. Vandals broke into his workshop. Wielding sledgehammers, they smashed the dinosaurs. Oh my God. Then they carted the pieces outside and buried them in the park. Waterhouse arrived to find chaos, chunks of rubble, mangled wire, plaster shards, and dust. He simply couldn't believe it. Oh my gosh, what a nightmare. Oh, look at that. Wow. Could you imagine that happening to you? All of your work that you've been working on for years just destroyed? Heartbreaking. Waterhouse stumbled outside, only to find mounds of dirt and dinosaur rubble. 2 years of his life utterly ruined. This could only be the work of Boss Tweed. The more Waterhouse thought about it, the angrier he became. He protested to the Parks Department. The situation was outrageous, criminal. Surely something could be done. But Waterhouse was bluntly told not to waste his time with dead animals when there were so many living ones around. Waterhouse staggered away. His dinosaurs were broken, and so was his spirit. Don't give up, Waterhouse. Don't let anger get a hold of you. Figure out a new way. You can do it. Let's see what happens. But in spite of the boss, Waterhouse would give America her dinosaurs. He left New York to create towering hadrosaur skeletons for Princeton University in New Jersey. There you go. He did something different. And the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. He stayed on at Princeton, yet again creating something that no one had ever seen before. The first series of paintings showing the development of life on Earth, including his beloved dinosaurs. Waterhouse was now 71 years old. It was time to go home. Wow, he had been over here a long time in the United States. The third age, home again. Waterhouse returned to London and exciting news. 30 iguanodon skeletons had been discovered in a coal mine in Belgium. It now appeared that Waterhouse's beloved iguanodon might have walked upright on its hind feet, and the spike on the nose, like a rhino's horn, might actually be a thumb. Imagine that. Waterhouse settled back into his cottage, Fossil Villa, near the Crystal Palace, and on pleasant afternoons he walked to the park and his marvelous creations. He wondered, what other surprises would scientists dig up as they searched the world for dinosaurs? Just as he had hoped, his models were the start of something wonderful, the world's first encounter with these ancient animals. People still come to the Crystal Palace Park in England to see the dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. Oh, they're still there. Wow, that's cool. And while his American dinosaurs no longer stand somewhere buried in Central Park, pieces of his dinosaurs still remain. Look at that. That's wild. And then this is information all about the true history of this man. It says, the author's note, what first drew me to this story, of course, was the dinner party, that and the wonderful name, Waterhouse Hawkins, because that's his real name. Kind of cool. I remember flipping through a dinosaur book one day in 1996 when I first saw the picture. The ever so formal waiters, the candlesticks, the chandelier, and all those elegant gentlemen stuffed into that incredible dinosaur. What was the story behind this picture? I've always been fascinated by artists, inventors, and creative people who stretch the boundaries of what's been done before. Waterhouse did this in a monumental way. Dinosaurs are such a part of our lives now that we're not surprised to hear a small child rattle off those long, long names. But there was a time when no one, besides a handful of scientists, knew what a dinosaur was. Waterhouse changed that. So then this talks about the models and how we know how a lot of his models are not as accurate as they had thought back then. So it talks about that because, you know, they didn't know as much about dinosaurs back then as we do now. And then the spirit of the artist, it says, so little has been written about Waterhouse's personal life that at times when researching this book, I felt a little bit like Richard Owen holding a single leg bone and trying to guess the bird. And I was thrilled to find a few samples of Waterhouse's writings and several newspaper articles recounting his speeches. And from these sources, I drew quotes for the book. So it talks about the little bit of research and that went into the research that the author did to try to create this book and make it very true. The boss. And this says, the Boss Tweed was one of the most corrupt politicians America has ever seen. He stole money from city budgets and gave many people jobs in exchange for their support. But exactly why did he want the Central Park dinosaurs smashed? Even if they were a waste of money, as Tweed claimed, why destroy what Waterhouse had already built? A likely explanation is that Waterhouse's speech and the audience's reaction were seen by Tweed as a challenge to his authority. And just a few weeks after Waterhouse's dinosaurs were destroyed, Tweed was arrested for fraud and theft. He escaped to Spain but was recaptured and sent back to New York, and he later died in prison. Crazy. So this tells about the boss. This tells about the Crystal Palace. And then this was an illustrator's note about his journey of making the illustrations for this book. So if you'd like to read about that, you can. And then finally, the very last page is just some of the dinosaurs that he painted. Pterodactyls then is how he painted them. And this is how we depict the pterodactylus now. So it's cool how to see, like, it's about 150 years, right? Let's see. It was like 1850s that he did this, Waterhouse. And so 1850s, so less 1950s, more than 150 years ago. I think if he said 1850s, if he said 1890s, then it's like 120 years ago. That's what they thought they looked like. And now they look like this. Megalosaurus now. And that's what they thought Megalosaurus looked like back then. The iguanodon now. And this is what they thought the iguanodon looked like back then. The plesiosaurus then. And this is what they believe the plesiosaurus looks like now. So a lot's changed. A lot more has been discovered about dinosaurs in the last 100, 150 years. Cool. Well, I hope you enjoyed that book called The Dinosaurs of Waterhouse Hawkins. Really cool, true story. And please, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Happy reading. Again, remember, you can always reread this story as many times as you want. I always learn something new every time I read a book. And I look forward to seeing you in our next story. Take care and have a great day. Bye.